Hey guys, welcome back to Ironside Ranch. Let's talk about water for every farm. Okay, so water is obviously our lifeblood, but it's also the lifeblood of your farm. Without good water, it's one of the first things that you have to do before you can even consider livestock, orchards, gardening, is you have to have an adequate supply of water. Now, how do most people in America get their water? Most people in America get their water from a municipal water supply, where it takes a lot of energy and stuff to treat that water and actually get it supplied to your house. It takes a lot of power to run those pumps that actually supply it to the field lines that supply your home. And so what we as homesteaders, and then you get into the kind of prepper community where you look at how do we get off to where we're more self-reliant. And there's a number of options that you can do. You can do things like a well system, you can do rainwater collection, and those are great options for your farm. Now, if you're in a subdivision and you're planning on moving out of the country, this is a great video for you. If you're in a subdivision and you're stuck there, guys, I don't have a lot of good advice for you other than to get a water filtration system in place, and you definitely need that. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but first I want to really dive into some of the details on getting a well set up, getting a rainwater system set up, and give you a real generic overview of what these systems actually end up looking like. So that's why we've got the whiteboard here. We're going to actually draw this out and show you guys what the system actually looks like. I'll show you exactly what mine looks like, and then I'll show you some other variables that you can put on that to get a setup for a rainwater system or a well system. Now, the first thing that you have to do with the well system is you have to figure out, do I have the capabilities? Now, and which one of these systems is better? So a well system, having a well drilled, is a better option as a general rule, because you have an unlimited supply of water for practical intents and purposes. I realize there's limits on the aquifer and that you can run a well dry, but if a well is drilled properly, just say, for sake of argument, you have at least a much more supply of water, let's put it that way, much greater supply of water than you would if you did rainwater collection. Wells are not practical in every area, and some areas are just too deep to actually have an adequate well, unless you're doing, farming or something like that, where you don't have any other option because rainwater collection is not in your cards. Rainwater collection works on a smaller scale and can run households and small farmsteads, but it's very difficult to make something like that run a large farm because the cisterns just get too astronomically expensive. And at that point in time, it actually makes sense to drill 1,500-foot wells because the price of the well offsets what the rainwater collection would cost you. That's my dad's. My dad grew up in Kansas, and their farm that they had when he was growing up, I think he told me their deepest well, I have to ask him to be sure, but I think he said it was 1,800 feet, which is like astronomical. You don't even hear that in the residential world. Anyways, they had a big diesel generator a big diesel pump that actually powered that thing because it was such a big well. I wonder what the casing would have been like. Had to have been at least an 8-inch casing, I think. But anyways, I don't know anything about those deep wells. I'm talking about residential use and how we're going to actually apply this. So the first thing we have to figure out is one, let's say we've established that we're going to use a well. First thing that we need to identify is how deep our well is going to be. Now, a good well driller will know that. And I'm going to try to face the camera, guys, when I'm talking. I know if I turn away and everything, it screws up the sound, so I don't have a mic on right now. But a well driller is going to have an idea. Our well driller knew within about 10 feet where he would hit water on our property. So our well, we drilled down our well, and our well bottom is at 260 feet. He hit water at 200 feet. We hung our well pump at 240 feet. So right here is where our well pump hangs in the well line. Okay, so the well line, to let you know what this one cost for us to drill 260 feet here, we only had one option. There was only one well driller around that would do it to this depth here because of the sand and our soil underneath the clay, and so it takes special equipment, I guess, to do this. And so the guy that drilled this, he charged us $6,000 to drill this well. A little bit of a pricey penny on that, but again, we didn't have a lot of options. So 260 feet is where we went, and it cost us $6,000 for that amount. Now, $6,000 for him. Most well drillers drill by the foot, and they charge you by the foot. For him, he said $6,000. He told us before we came that $6,000 would get us to 230 feet, and that if he needed a little bit more, he'd basically give it to us for free. Well, not free. We paid for it, guaranteed, but he'd give it to us at no additional cost. $6,000 is what he guaranteed because he knew the aquifer here. He knew he'd hit water at that depth. Now, you hit water at that depth, you hang your well here, you've got a well pipe and a line coming up your well casing, and you're going to have, we have a backflow preventer up here to keep water from pressing down. I'm sorry, not up there, it's down here. Scratch that. It's not at the top, it's at the bottom. So you have a backflow preventer there that keeps any of that water pressure, because remember, you have this line has a lot of pressure in it from the residual pressure from the pump or from the pressure tank pushing down on it, as well as the weight of the water pushes down, and it can wear out those pumps. And so you want to put a check valve above it. Check valves are a lot cheaper to replace than a new pump, even though both of them require you pulling the pump out, unfortunately. Now, up at the top, if you're in the north, you'll have your ground level here, you'll have your well casing come out, and you'll have a pitless adapter that goes down here. This is where your water line would then come out to go to the house. Now, in the south, we don't use pitless adapters because it doesn't get cold enough here, so it's not really an important feature. And so instead, what we use is we just use a wellhead, and so our line comes directly out the top, and we have a small well house built around this. Those well houses can be pretty shanty. They don't need to be very big. All they're doing is protecting the equipment that's in there from getting rained on. And so in this case, you're going to have your pressure tank in here. Your well line comes into the bottom of the pressure tank. At the bottom of this pressure tank, there's a big T connection. That'll have things like your pressure switch that actually identifies and tells the well pump to pump water. Those common sizes for those are a 40-60, 40-60 or a 30-50, okay? Those are pretty common sizes for pressure switches. We elected to use a 40-60. I like to have a little bit more pressure. That keeps our pressure in the range of 40 psi to 60 psi. Most households are built on with the idea of the range of normal being 40 to 80 psi. That's why I like it at that level. You can order larger ones and different ones out there. These are the two that are on the market the most that you can go down to any Lowe's and Home Depot and pick up replacements for, which to me is very important. I want replacement parts to be pretty readily accessible for them. Okay, so then the water comes out here, and then this is where it goes to the house. Now, depending on this distance to the home, you may or may not have to have a secondary pump, and you may have to have a submersible pump, or not submersible, I'm sorry, a jet pump here in line with your submersible pump. So to give you an example, my grandfather's well, he's about 500 feet on the well, on the well depth here, right? So 500 feet for that submersible pump. Then he's got enough sulfur, he had to build a blow-off system at the top that actually just kind of agitates the water and allows the sulfur to escape out. So because he's got that system in there, he needed another pump here, also because the distance from his wellhead to his actual house is, just estimating, it's probably about a football field. So it's a good bit, a good 300 feet there or more. And so you got to have an extra pump there. So he's got to have these two pumps working in conjunction with one another to get that water to his home. So this is a great option for guys that are on homesteads, and this works really well. For ours, we have actually three lines coming off. We have one line that runs over this way and runs 15 acres right over here. And then we have another line that comes up and runs 5 acres over here. And that system is all set up to be outside the filtration system. So one of the issues that you'll run into on both types of systems, whether you use rainwater or a well, is going to be to have a filtration system installed. We'll talk about that here in just a second. First, let's talk about the rainwater collection system. Basics of your rainwater collection system. Let's do a cross-sectional of your home. So we have cross-sectional view of the house. And on your eaves here, you have your gutters, okay? So these gutters, basic, simple system, we connect with a pipe and discharge into a cistern. The cistern ideally would be buried a little bit below grade, at least part of it, which is why we put it down like that. Now, you have a couple options here. You can use another jet pump on here with pressure switches and everything installed and pump this directly into your house. Well, another option is if you have a hillside nearby, let's say you have a hillside back here behind your house, you can put, well, I'm out of the view, sorry. Let's change this up, guys. Sorry, I know I look like an artist, but I'm sorry. So we have another cistern up here on the hilltop behind the house. The water can then be pumped directly from here using a 12-volt solar-powered pump. These are really nice options because if I can pump up here, and let's say I have 10 days of water stored up here, then I don't even have to have a battery backup. All I have to do is have that pump powerful enough to refill that in about 24 hours, because that'll run that for a day or two, and it'll get enough residual solar power that it'll actually still pick it up, unless we just have a long period of time, in which case then, maybe you can run out there and hook a battery to it and actually pump it. There's different options there and different backup systems, so you might want to make quick connects out there so you can do that when you need to. But for the most part, a small solar powered pump will probably take care of that. Water, you have to look at water in the capacity of, I can either get a lot of water all at once with low pressure, or a lot of pressure and a little amount of water. And so what we're trying to do is we're actually doing, over time, we're building it up to where we can release this from here and actually release that water down and have good pressure at the house. And so the rule of thumb here, there's a lot of variables that come into place, but the rule of thumb for your fall, because we have our fall from the water here, so the water pressure coming back to the house, so you have two lines coming up, there's a pressure calculation for this. Now, the actual calculation takes into account the friction of the lines, right? Because you have 3/4 inch lines have a lot more friction than 1 inch lines. And so it takes into account the friction of the lines, the size of the tank, and the amount of fluid in the tank. If you have a 50,000 gallon cistern up here, that 50,000 gallons, when it's completely full, is going to have a lot more pressure than when it's only got 2,000 gallons left in it. So what we want to calculate is what's the pressure inside this line that gives us our minimum. And what the pressure there is going to be is the easy calculation, again, not an exact science, but the easy calculation is 0.43 pounds per square inch per foot of fall, right? So if we have this hilltop is 100 feet above this house, then that hilltop is going to provide about 43 pounds per square inch of water, regardless of what the tank level's at. Now, obviously, if the tank level's full and you have bigger lines that don't have as much friction, you get you're going to get a little bit more pressure in there. And so one of the things that you have to look at is the line coming back to the house has to be of a certain size, right? 3/4 inch lines, they have a lot more friction than a 1/4 inch and than a 1 inch, and a 1 1/4 has, what is it? It carries like 40% more capacity than a 1 inch line. So what I would be looking at if I was doing this method, I would be looking at a minimum of a 1 1/4 inch line, probably looking at a 1 1/2 or a 2 inch line, truthfully. And truth be told, I guess I would look at a 2 inch line. Actually, if I was doing it, I would do it right and do it one time and look at a 2 inch line. What kind of line would I do? I would do a high density polyethylene. I think those are the best lines for this type of operation. High density polyethylene is very rugged. It doesn't break down. It doesn't get brittle and crack like PVC does. It doesn't have it doesn't have ridges in it, because you could get this entire distance done with one roll of solid line, so you don't have to deal with any connections in there. Connections are prone to leak. They add friction to the line. And that's where your problems are. So I would avoid putting connections in this. When I say connections, I mean like several pieces of PVC with connectors in there where they put them all together, right? I would rather have one solid continuous run of high density polyethylene line. You can buy those in rolls of, I believe PowerFlex Fence sells them for 500 feet. So you can go a good distance with a 500 foot roll, so there's no real need to do this any other way. And even if let's say you had to go 1,000 feet, you have one splice in there, as opposed to doing it with PVC, where you've got to splice every 20 feet, right? So it's kind of a no-brainer to me to do it with high density polyethylene. PEX is not as durable as a high density polyethylene. That's why I don't like it. It's also a little bit more expensive. PEX works really well for inside the home, but underground the HDPE pipe is better, in my opinion. The other thing is what the well supply company is going to give you. It's for actually hanging wells anyways, and well pipes. All of our exterior lines are high density polyethylene. Everything that goes below the ground, everything that I replace is high density polyethylene. There is some CPVC there from when the house was built, but and that we've tapped into. But anything that we add or that we replace is high density polyethylene line. Now, 3/4 inch line is a little bit more affordable. I do try to avoid 3/4 inch line because the connections don't seem to work as well. You do need to tend to buy the compression fit connections on there rather than using barbs and hose clamps. Barbs and hose clamps seem to get a lot more force and a lot more grip on them when you use at least a 1 inch line or larger. So that's what I would personally do. If I was doing a high density polyethylene, I would not go lower than a 1 inch line, even though we've got some 3/4 inch line here. Anything we add from here out will be 1 inch lines, and they have a lot better connections and make they're a lot less prone to leak. I don't know exactly why that is, other than the surface area and the tension you get on the actual hose clamps going around it. Y'all have seen my videos on this stuff. I've got videos showing you how to connect these. So if you want to look at those, I've got some in the past that will show you how to do all that stuff. But I'll see if I can find them, put the link down in the description. But anyways, I just really wanted to go over how to do this with you. Now, the final step, and I know this is getting kind of a long video, so we'll try to hustle through this. I wanted to give you guys an overview on this water situation because water is so paramount to your success as a homestead. The final step is your filtration system. Your filtration system, whether you do rainwater or a well, you need a filtration system. Wells get contaminated, rainwater gets contaminated. Even if it tests good now, doesn't mean that it's not going to get contaminated in the future. This is why you put a filtration system on there. The filtration system, if you don't absolutely have to have it, maybe buy one and keep it in reserve or whatever, but we keep a filtration system on there regardless of how our well water tests, so that way we know we're drinking good, safe water. And in fact, we actually have a secondary system because we filter all of our drinking water here in the house with a Berkey gravity feed filter. Now, you're pumping from your well pump comes up, okay, and then after it leaves the pressure tank, so the pressure tank being right here, after it leaves the pressure tank, you're going to run it through a filtration system. So this is basically a 3-stage system with different pipes coming out, and this goes out to the house. Right here, we have a sediment filter. So this thing fills up, gets all the sediment and the gunk out. This is the one that has to get replaced the most often. Right now, we're doing about every 4 to 6 weeks. We're hoping as our well gets broken in and gets some of the sediment out there, that this will eventually go to about 3 to 6 months. But that's where we are right now. Next, we have our iron filter in here. Now, we have a lot of iron in our water, so we had to add an iron filter. You may not have an iron problem in your water, in which case you can add either a secondary charcoal filter, you can add a sediment filter. There's a number of filters that you can add on there to get rid of whatever it is at your property. Now, the iron filter right here, this is a filter that's specifically to get rid of high iron, and it actually helps with the sulfur as well. One of the things with the sulfur is to agitate the water, and so the more things that we actually run it through, the more the water gets agitated and allows some of that sulfur to get picked up with the last filter here, which is a carbon filter. These two filters last, again, about 4 to 6 months. Okay, so that's the anticipation anyways. We haven't had to replace one yet because we haven't had our well in long enough, but our anticipation is about 4 to 6 months is what we should get out of those. So that's what we're looking at for a filtration system. Then, like I said, we have a Berkey at the house that we filter all our drinking water with. Whenever we start smelling the sulfur in the water, we know our sediment filter's full. So we go out there and replace this one first, so we buy those ones in a little bit more bulk than the other two. You can set these filters up however you want. You don't have to use all of them. You can leave one of them blank. If you don't have iron in your water and you don't need it, let's leave one of them open. That's perfectly acceptable to do. There's no reason to have a filter in there if you don't have something that you needed to filter. At a minimum, I would have a sediment and a charcoal filter on there. There are secondary sediment filters, so if you need to have, let's say you have a charcoal filter, a iron filter, and radon filter or whatever, I don't know, whatever filter you want to add over here, you can buy a secondary sediment filter that sits off to the side if you need to do that. We actually had that on ours, and the one that I got did not work very well, so we ended up taking the filter out of it and we just run it open. I'll eventually remove it off of there and clean it up a little bit, but right now that's where it is. So you have options there. If it was me personally, what I would probably do if I didn't have any need for this is I would run a secondary sediment filter in there to make my carbon filters last a little bit longer. Sediment filters are pretty cheap. Carbon filters are a little bit more expensive, and so I would rather make my carbon filter last a little bit while longer, but certainly up to you and how you want to do that. They have washable sediment filters. I do not advise those. They don't work very well. They're kind of a pain, and it's hard to wash them when you have to shut off your water to get your sediment filter out of there. So personally, we use disposable ones. I have a washable one on hand for an emergency. If I can't get filters, I can at least plug that one in. But I would not advisable. Get the disposable ones. They work a lot better. They're basically just a tight woven paper. Okay. So this is the basic setup for a well system, right? Whether you're doing for a water system for a farm, whether you're doing a well water or a rainwater collection system, you need to have a filtration system in here. There are a number of filtration options out there. You can look at things like reverse osmosis. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of it because they require a lot more maintenance. They're expensive, and I think they're completely unnecessary. Water filters get rid of the particles that you're worried about in there. So unless you have some very specific reason for having a reverse osmosis in your water, I don't see a huge benefit to them. Filtration systems work very well. If you're worried about bacteria, you can add a UV light filter. Those are shown, studies show those to work fairly well. The carbon filter should pick up everything. There's really not much need to have anything beyond the carbon filter. If you want to add the UV light filter, go nuts. We personally elected not to. And partly because I don't want to run the power for it. So there are ways of doing that solar, but I didn't want to run the power for it. So and I don't see enough benefit to it. Again, the carbon filter should get everything. Right now, with our water has high sulfur. This filtration system takes out all the sulfur. We have no smell of sulfur in the house. The moment we smell sulfur, we know that one of these is bad, usually this one. So anyways, guys, that's all I have for you today. I will get more videos out to you here in the future. I wanted to go over our water system. I've got another video coming up that I'm going to show you guys how to diagnose some problems with the well house, to show you how to take care of this crap, because wells are actually fairly simple systems, but they can be a little bit daunting if you don't know what you're getting into. So really appreciate y'all watching. Make sure and like and subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so, and we'll catch y'all later.